Undu 3, 17 a.m., December 22nd, 1944. The air in the cellar is so cold it feels like a physical weight. It smells of damp stone, frost, and the distant, acrid tang of artillery smoke. This is Harkin, a small Belgian town that has become the epicenter of a pocket, a besieged anomaly in the German advance. The Battle of the Bulge is freezing, and it is starving. Technical Sergeant Elias Thorne, 101st Airborne Division, pulls his wool blanket tighter. He is not a paratrooper. He is not an infantryman. He is, by trade and by army classification, a master baker, attached to the Quartermaster Corps, G4 Logistics. His current post is the ruined cellar of what was, 2 weeks ago, the town's primary boulangerie. The great brick ovens are 2 floors above him, cold and silent under a blanket of snow and rubble. Thorne is a man defined by a different kind of precision. His war is not fought with a rifle, but with yeast, enriched flour, and temperature. And by every metric he values, he is failing. His credentials, earned in the immaculate steam-heated kitchens of the Fort Benning Officers' Club, mean nothing here. The 12 usual men trapped in the Harkin pocket are on quarter rations, and those ran out yesterday. He looks at the last physical object of his trade. It is a single 50-pound sack of Type 1 enriched flour dragged from a burning supply truck. It sits alone in the beam of his flashlight, a white sarcophagus. It is useless. 50 pounds of flour cannot feed 12 Orne men. It is a mockery, a symbol of a logistical line that has been severed. The shelling outside resumes, a dull percussion that shakes dust from the ceiling. Elias Thorne is a baker with nothing to bake, surrounded by men who will soon be too weak to fight. The problem is not the German tanks. The problem is chemistry. Thorne does not sleep. He listens to the sounds of the cellar, the drip of melting snow, the low groans of exhausted sentries changing watch, the skittering of mice. His mind is not on the battle plan. It is on the manifest. His inventory is a tragedy. In one corner, 300 pounds of spoiled acorns gathered by Belgian children weeks ago. In another, sacks of beet pulp, a coarse animal feed found in an adjacent barn. And finally, a small pile of sawdust, bagged by engineers from their saws as they fortified the command post. He thinks of his grandfather, a Nebraska farmer who survived the Dust Bowl. He remembers his grandfather's stories, not of valor, but of resilience. Stories of extender bread, made with anything that could provide bulk. The idea is a flicker, a heresy. He rises, the cold floor biting at his feet, and walks to the sacks. He rubs the coarse beet pulp between his fingers. He smells the acidic tang of the sawdust. "What are you doing, Sergeant?" A voice from the shadows. It is Corporal Dusty Miller, his assistant, a lanky kid from Chicago who just wants a hot meal. "I'm thinking, Corporal." "Doesn't smell like bread," Miller mutters, eyeing the sawdust. "It isn't bread," Thorne says, his voice quiet. "It's fuel." He knows instinctively what this means. He is not just a baker, he is a chemist, and the ingredients before him are not food. They are raw cellulose, tannins, and complex carbohydrates. The strange collection of spoiled, inedible materials is a puzzle. He believes he can solve it. What he doesn't know is that this desperate, insane idea will be the only thing that stands between the 101st Airborne and total collapse. The official designation for the crisis is the Harkin Pocket, As of December 20th, 1944, field reports from General Corman, the pocket's commander, confirm 1,200 U.S. troops are encircled by elements of 5 German divisions, including the 2nd Panzer. The primary supply route is cut. The weather, a crippling combination of fog, ice and low clouds, has grounded the C-47 transport planes of the 9th Troop Carrier Command. A memo from the divisional G4, dated 800 hours, December 21st, paints a stark picture. Ammunition, 30 caliber, 3 days supply. Medical supplies critical, rations exhausted. The temperature in the foxholes along the perimeter hovers at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. The daily caloric requirement for a soldier in active winter combat is estimated at 500 calories. The men are currently receiving less than 400, salvaged from half-frozen vegetables and captured German hardtack. The problem is systemic and total. The Nebelwerfer rockets provide a constant, demoralizing soundtrack, but the true enemy is metabolic. After-action reports from the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment note a sharp increase in non-combat casualties, trench foot, severe frostbite, and systemic exhaustion. The problem is not simply hunger. It is the collapse of the human machine. The body, denied fuel, begins to consume itself. Muscle tissue wastes, cognitive function declines. A man cannot aim a rifle when his hands shake uncontrollably. An Army Field Manual on Nutrition, published 1942, states, "An Army's combat effectiveness is directly proportional to its caloric intake." By that metric, the Harkin pocket is already lost. The attempts to resupply by air are disastrous. On December 23rd, a brief break in the weather allows a drop. 80% of the parachuted supplies, pushed from altitudes of 2,000 feet to avoid flak, drift directly into German-held territory. The failure is so complete, it feels like a strategic surrender to the laws of physics. The statistics from the G4 memo are cold, but the reality in the aid station is a slow-motion disaster. Major Kent, the divisional surgeon, operates in the same cellar as Thorne. He sees the translation of data into human suffering. The men brought in are not victims of shrapnel. They are victims of thermodynamics. Their bodies are simply shutting down. The cold burns calories they do not have. Morale is not a number, but Kent sees it disappearing. He sees the hollow look in their eyes, the profound lethargic stillness that precedes death. This is the human consequence. It is the 19-year-old private who cannot be roused from his foxhole, not because he is defiant, but because he lacks the physical glycogen reserves to move. It is the quiet conversations between officers, not about counterattacks, but about the honorable procedure for surrender. The suffering is not acute. It is a creeping, systemic rot. The surgeons, the engineers, the combat commanders, they all look to the sky, praying for Patton's tanks or for a break in the clouds. They understand ballistics and triage. They do not understand the problem as Thorne does. They see an empty pantry. Thorne sees a chemical equation that must be solved. The experts agree, in their silent, exhausted glances. It cannot be done. The pocket will fall. Elias Thorne is not a product of the military. He is 34 years old, drafted from Ames, Iowa. He is the son of a baker who, in turn, was the son of a baker. His family survived the Great Depression not by luck, but by meticulous calculation. He grew up seeing his father stretch 30 pounds of flour into 50 pounds of sellable bread, using potato mash, boiled barley, and an almost religious understanding of gluten. He did not go to college, but he is a dedicated autodidact. His personal effects, locked in a footlocker he assumes is now in German hands, include not pin-up magazines, but chemical journals. The chemistry of baking, industrial and engineering chemistry, and a well-thumbed copy of The Soybean, Chemistry and Technology. He sees the world as a series of inputs and outputs. He is quiet, almost shy, a man who prefers the 4:00 a.m. silence of a bakery to the company of other men. The army, in its wisdom, saw Baker on his civilian record and assigned him to the Quartermaster Corps. They intended for him to bake soft white bread for rear echelon officers. They gave him access to the finest enriched flour, dried milk, and yeast. They accidentally trained him for 2 years on an unlimited supply of perfect ingredients. They had no idea they were also giving him the time and resources to understand fundamentally what happens when those perfect ingredients disappear. He isn't a soldier. He is a resource management specialist with flour on his hands. The moment of insight is not dramatic. It is cold, analytical. Thorne stands before his 3 primary extenders, the acorns, the beet pulp, and the sawdust. He knows the acorns are rich in fats and protein, but are lethally bitter from tannins. The beet pulp is cellulose and sugar, but indigestible in its raw form. The sawdust, fine pine shavings from the engineers, is pure cellulose. To a human stomach, it is timber. "Corporal," Thorne says, his voice flat, "bring me the vinegar from the mess stores, all off it, and light a fire under that big copper pot." The crazy idea forms. The acorns, they must be leached, boiled in 3 changes of water, just as his grandfather taught him, to draw out the tannic acid. The beet pulp, it must be pulverized and hydrated. The sawdust. This is the insane part. He will attempt an acid hydrolysis. By boiling the fine wood pulp in a weak acid, the vinegar, he can begin to break down the complex cellulose into cruder, simpler sugars. It's a primitive version of a process used in industrial chemistry. He presents his plan to Major Kent, the surgeon. Kent listens, his face a mask of exhausted disbelief. "Sergeant, you are suggesting we feed these men sawdust." "I'm suggesting we feed them hydrolyzed cellulose, Major, as a binder. The acorns provide fat. The beet pulp provides bulk. My flour holds it together. It will be 400 calories per portion. It will be gritty. It will taste awful, but it will be fuel." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Kent snaps. "You'll kill them. You'll give them all septic shock, dysentery." "They are already dying, Major," Thorne says, not as a challenge, but as a fact. "Starvation is a 100% fatality. I'm aiming for 85% survival." Kent stares at him. The man is not a fanatic. He's a technician. "I can't authorize this. It's medical malpractice." "I'm not asking for authorization, sir," Thorne says, turning back to his copper pot. "I'm just requisitioning the vinegar." He turns to Corporal Miller. "Fire the ovens. We're doing it." The cellar transforms into a laboratory. The work is grim and exhausting. Thorne and Miller, joined by 2 other mess hall privates, begin the process. The first step is leaching the acorns. They use a massive copper laundry tub, hauling buckets of precious half-frozen water. The acorns are boiled, the dark, bitter water is dumped, and the process repeats. After 3 boilings, the acorns are pale and soft. The beet pulp is harder, it's dry and tough as boot leather. They use a hand-cranked meat grinder, salvaged from the butcher's shop, to break it down. The grinder screeches, the men sweat, but after 4 hours, they have a coarse, damp mash. The final element is the sawdust. Thorne adds the bags of fine pine shavings to the last of the vinegar and a pot of water, boiling it over a low fire. The cellar fills with a sharp, resinous stink. The other men in the cellar cough, their eyes watering. It smells like a burning lumberyard. This is the secret test. Thorne is creating a crude wood sugar paste. Corporal Miller, stirring the viscous grey-brown slurry, gags. "Sergeant, this ain't right." "Keep stirring, Miller." They combine the three extenders, the leached acorn mash, the beet pulp, and the hydrolyzed wood paste. The resulting dough is heavy, wet, and the color of wet cement. It smells of vinegar, pine, and damp earth. Thorne retrieves his last 50-pound sack of flour. He uses it as a binder, a chemical necessity to hold the disparate, hostile ingredients together. He kneads this monstrous dough on a sheet of plywood, his arms aching. It has no life, no spring. It is a dense, putty-like mass. He forms the dough not into loaves, but into hard 3-inch by 3-inch squares, like thick tiles. "We're not baking bread," he tells Miller. "We're firing bricks. They need to be dry, high heat, fast." They use the still functional brick ovens upstairs, feeding the fires with broken furniture. The preparation is a quiet, desperate act of faith against all culinary logic. The first test is a failure. Thorne pulls the biscuits from the oven. They are charred black on the outside, and inside a wet, sour, inedible paste. The acid and wood combination is too raw. He throws one against the wall, and it sticks with a wet thud. Miller looks devastated. "It's over." "No," Thorne says, his mind racing. "The heat was wrong. The hydrolysis wasn't complete." He looks at the mass of remaining dough. He needs an alkali to neutralize the acid. "Miller, find the baking soda, the real baking soda." They had a small supply for cleaning. Miller finds it. Thorne recalibrates. He adds the soda to the next batch. The paste fizzes, releasing carbon dioxide. He's neutralizing the vinegar in the dough. He's also, by accident, leavening it. He refires the ovens, this time starting with a lower heat to dry the bricks, then finishing with a blast of high heat to create a crust. He pulls the second batch out. They are dark brown, almost black. They are hard as stone, but they are dry. He takes one and with effort breaks it in two. The inside is a dense, uniform crumb. It smells strange, earthy, acrid, with a hint of sweetness from the beets. He bites into it. The grit is immediate. It's like chewing sand and glue, but it is unmistakably food. He chews, swallows. He hands a piece to Miller. Miller eyes it, then eats. He chews for a full minute. "Sergeant, it ain't Mom's, but it's bread." At that moment, Major Kent enters the bakery, drawn by the strange smoke. He sees the two men chewing. He sees the trays of dark, steaming bricks. He looks at Thorne, his eyes wide, not with anger, but with a desperate, sudden hope. "How many can you make?" Thorne wipes his hands on his apron. "How many do you need, Major?" "All of them." If stories like this fascinate you, stay with us. The next chapter of wartime innovation might surprise you. The scene is the divisional command post, so 600 hours, Christmas Eve. General Corman sits at a table, maps pushed aside. The room is freezing. His staff, hollow-eyed and unshaven, stands with him. In the center of the table sits one of the dark 3-by-3-inch biscuits. "I am told," Corman says, his voice a low rasp, "that G4 has issued a new ration." He looks at Major Kent. "Sir, this is a provisional solution," Kent begins. "Sergeant Thorne, of the Quartermaster Corps." "I'm not interested in the sergeant," Corman cuts him off. "I'm interested in this." He taps the brick. G4 tells me you've requisitioned the 82nd Engineers' wood shavings and the entire 3rd Battalion's emergency vinegar supply. Explain. Thorne, summoned from the bakery, steps forward. He is covered in grey-brown flour. Sir, it's a survival biscuit. It's 30% extender. The extender is a composite of leached acorn meal, pulverized beet pulp, and hydrolyzed wood cellulose. A colonel from G3 Operations laughs, a short barking sound. Hydro what? You're feeding them sawdust. Yes, sir, Thorne says evenly. It provides 400 calories per 100-gram portion. It's 12% protein, 40% complex carbohydrate. It is not, by any definition, good, sir, but it is fuel. I've run the numbers. We have enough extenders to produce 24 Lozero biscuits. That's 2 per man, per day for 45 days. And the side effects? Kent interjects, playing his role. The risk? Digestive distress, sir, Thorne admits. Cramping. Dysentery, I estimate, in 15% of cases, but it is non-lethal. It is better than 100% systemic starvation. There's a long silence. Corman stares at the biscuit. The survival of his entire command rests on this baker's insane, medieval chemistry. He picks up the biscuit. It is heavy. He lifts it to his mouth and, with a visible effort, bites. The crunch echoes in the room. He chews, his jaw working. His face is impassive. He swallows. He looks at Thorne. Not at the colonels, not at the surgeon. He looks at the baker. Sergeant, get to work. You have priority over all divisional assets. The bakery in the cellar becomes the beating heart of the Harkin pocket. It is a factory. The 101st Field Kitchens, previously idle, are consolidated under Thorne's command. Engineers rig blowers to the ovens. Men who were, a week ago, firing 30-caliber machine guns are now hauling water, grinding acorns and stirring the grate, steaming vats of wood pulp slurry. The smoke from the bakery's chimney is constant, a strange, sweet, acrid plume that puzzles the German observers. December 27th. The German 2nd Panzer Division launches its most determined assault on the perimeter near Marburg. The men of the 506th PR are exhausted. They have not eaten a real meal in 8 days. Their hands are shaking from cold, hunger, and fatigue. The Thorne biscuits are delivered to the line in ammunition crates. The men are skeptical. They are heavy, black, and smell like burnt vinegar. They call them Baker's Folly, sawdust patties, and Thorne's tombstones. A private in a foxhole breaks one against the stock of his rifle. He chews the gritty mass. It tastes, he reports, like a Christmas tree, but he eats it. And 10 minutes later, something happens. The gnawing, hollow emptiness in his stomach recedes. It is replaced by a dense, warm weight. The violent shivering in his hands begins to subside. It is not energy, not inspiration. It is fuel. When the German armor appears through the fog, he finds he can lift his bazooka and hold it steady. The impact is immediate and quantifiable. Field reports from the aid stations note a stabilization in combat effectiveness. The rate of non-battle casualties, the men collapsing from sheer exhaustion, drops by 30% within 48 hours of the new rations distribution. The biscuits are terrible, but they work. The men of the 101st are no longer starving. They are just miserable, and miserable men can still fight. General Corman visits the line during a lull. A private offers him one of the tombstones. Corman takes it, eats it without flinching, and hands the private a cigar. He sees Thorne delivering a fresh batch and gives him a single, curt nod. It is all the recognition a baker needs in a war zone. When Patton's 4th Armored Division breaks the siege on January 1st, 1945, they find the 101st Airborne starving, frozen, and completely defiant. The legend of General McAuliffe's nuts response to the surrender demand becomes history. The story of Elias Thorne's bread does not. It is buried in the classified after-action reports of the Quartermaster Corps. The numbers are staggering. G4 Logistics Analysis estimates that Thorne's formula, utilizing over 12 tons of acorns, beets and wood shavings, provided over 14 million calories to the besieged garrison. This innovation, born of desperation, extended the pocket's viable defense window by an estimated 18 days. It was the precise margin between holding the line and mass surrender. The Thorne biscuit itself is, thankfully, relegated to the footnotes of military history. It is never produced again, but the principle, nutritional chemistry under extreme duress, becomes a new field of study. The Army's research into emergency rations changes. The focus shifts from mere preservation to caloric density and the use of unconventional, synthesized components. The compressed food bars used in the Apollo program, the high-energy supplements for modern special forces, and the fortified, shelf-stable rations used in global disaster relief are all the direct descendants of Thorne's desperate, gritty invention. Technical Sergeant Elias Thorne is quietly awarded a Bronze Star for meritorious service in a combat zone. He is not cited for valor, but for exceptional ingenuity in the field of nutritional logistics. He returns to Ames, Iowa. He opens his bakery. He bakes the finest white bread, rye, and pumpernickel in the state. He never speaks of the war, and he never, ever serves acorn bread. He dies in 1978, his name unknown to history, but a savior to the 12 Dao Asian men who survived on his fuel. Today, the science of survival nutrition is a multi-billion-dollar industry. We see it in the engineered supplements of endurance athletes, in the genetic modification of climate-resistant crops, and in the MREs, meals ready to eat, that still, to this day, prioritize caloric density and shelf life over palatability. The fundamental challenge of Harkin remains: how do you fuel a human body when the supply chain collapses? It is a core problem for Antarctic research stations, for disaster response teams, and for the planners dreaming of colonies on Mars. We celebrate the general who holds the line, the paratrooper who takes the ridge. But history is just as often turned by the quiet technician, the engineer who bypasses a circuit, the doctor who invents a new suture, or the baker who looks at a forest and does not just see trees, he sees carbohydrates. Innovation is rarely a flash of genius. More often, it is an act of defiance, a refusal to accept the consensus of impossibility. It is desperation, married to expertise. The cellars of Harkin are quiet now. The great brick ovens are cold, tourist attractions in a peaceful town. But the principle of Elias Thorne's formula endures. It is a silent, gritty testament that when faced with an absolute limit, the human mind will find a way to break down the very walls of its prison, and if necessary, consume them for strength. Every great idea begins as an act of defiance against impossibility. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world?